Hello everyone. I'm going to do kind of a different video than I normally do. Usually I'm reading off a script and doing a long form video, uh, which, I mean, I kind of prefer to do videos like I'm doing right now because I sound more natural and they're also easier to make, and it allows me to produce videos on a faster time scale. So going forward, I think I'm going to start doing more videos like this. They're going to be shorter because of that, but I just kind of want to pump more content out. So today I just kind of want to go over this notion in philosophy. It's very popular actually, and I'm sure people who watch my channel or anyone who's really just interested in philosophy in general will come across this at some point in their uh, investigation of philosophy. They'll see this whole idea that this really goes back to Plato, that everything is an illusion. We live in a simulation. What we see, what we know, is not real. What else? I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it. Once again, this goes back to Plato's allegory of the cave, which, if you're not familiar with, you just look it up. But to kind of give you a simplified version of it, basically, there's people in a cave, and for their whole life, they are exposed to a wall, which they see the reflection of, animals. Uh, Behind them being lit by a fire. They see the shadows on a wall, so they think that's what reality is. But then they come to see it's not reality once they get out of the cave. And some of the people don't want to leave the cave because they like the illusion. Uh, there's a bunch of other stuff that goes with that. But basically, I think this argument that's very popular. It's also seen not just in like contemporary philosophy. It's also seen in like a lot of like Far Eastern religions, whether it be Hinduism or some schools of Buddhism or stuff like that. And I really think this. I don't want to say it's not true or it's logically impossible to be true, but I do think that it's logically impossible to argue for it, and I don't think there's any reason to believe it's true. And I also don't think that we should be accepting metaphysical claims without justification. So essentially, there are various simulation arguments. They all fail because they don't account for the presuppositional flaw in the metaphysical state of affairs, which would be an illusion. So essentially, the first argument I want to give here, and also before I do that, I want to preface it by saying that metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, the three branches of philosophy, and within metaphysics, there's like a subset, I guess you can say, of ontology, which is essentially the theory of entities. It's concerned with what exists, and also you could also say with what doesn't exist, if you want, I guess. Essentially, all these domains of philosophy really interact with one another. So when you're making an epistemological claim, you're also making a metaphysical claim, and when you're making a metaphysical claim, you're also making an epistemological claim. Now, with ethics, it's a little bit harder because with ethics, I'm under the impression that in order to have any form of ethics, they need to be grounded in a God. But uh, I think for now, we'll just stick with the fact that epistemology and metaphysics really uh, tie into one another, and they're kind of inseparable. So I'll just give you an example of this before we get into the argument here. If I make the claim that only particulars exist, that would presuppose that I have some way of knowing that only particulars exist. So that's how metaphysics, the claim that only particulars exist, would affect epistemology. So if only particulars exist, then I would also have to conclude that I could only know particulars. I couldn't know universals because how could I know something that doesn't exist? Now, I think that was just an example of how metaphysics affects epistemology. So I'll show you how epistemology um, basically affects metaphysics. So, in a sense, epistemology in and of itself, because it's a human endeavor, doesn't affect the state of affairs around us, but it affects our epistemological theory affects the kinds of claims we can make about metaphysics. So, if I'm an empiricist and I believe that only materialism exists, or sorry, not only materialism is a valid theory, which is a metaphysical theory, then it would also follow that I shouldn't be able to believe in things like uh, abstract entities, like Platonic numbers and stuff like that. Metaphysics also affects things like language. Um, what would be an example of this? Past tense words like was and were, like those are time determined words. Time is a metaphysical, uh, we could say a metaphysical entity or a metaphysical object. So to get into the argument here, if we presuppose that everything is an illusion, that is to say that everything is fake, then it also would presuppose that the things which we are arguing for, or the things which we premise our argument on, would also be fake. Now, if that's the case, uh, all arguments presuppose the laws of logic, so we'll reduce it down to that. There's no way you can argue without presupposing the laws of logic, and even to argue against the laws of logic, you'd have to presuppose them, so it doesn't work. But anyway, um, if I'd be premising my argument for the simulation or for the illusion on things that I know, and remember here, the claim here is that everything we know is an illusion. If I premise my argument on things that I know to be an illusion, then the laws of logic, those would be invalid. Those would not be something I can premise my argument on because they too would be part of the illusion. If everything I'm trying to prove exists, and I can't use things that exist to prove itself, I mean that would be circular almost. So I can't premise my argument on something that isn't real. That would fail. That would not do me too well. Um, Furthermore, um, you could also say that coming to know that you are an illusion would in it of itself be an illusion. So the knowledge that you are an illusion is also illusory. Therefore, if the knowledge is illusory, that would mean that the knowledge is invalid once again. So therefore this, you can't really argue for anything to be objectively real if everything's an illusion. There's nothing you can base your argument on because you don't know anything outside of the illusion. And also to say that, once again, not to repeat myself, but to say that um, something uh, is an illusion, or to really to make any metaphysical claim, it presupposes some epistemological position. So if you say that everything in the world is an illusion, well, the only way you could really know that is to somehow be outside of the illusion, or at the very least get some information from outside of the illusion. Like when I say outside of the illusion, I don't necessarily mean be physically outside the illusion. You would have to like have some knowledge of something that's not illusory to know that this is illusory. You can't know what's an illusion without having something that's to contrast it with. Essentially, is what I'm saying. So that's the fundamental epistemological issue. So the reason we can't believe, or the reason I should probably rephrase it this way, the reason that we shouldn't believe that everything is an illusion is precisely because there's no epistemological position that allows us to argue for it, and therefore it doesn't mean it's logically impossible. It just means that there's no reason to believe it. Now you could say, oh well, just because there's no reason to believe it doesn't mean it's not true. And yes, I would agree with you, but just because something is potentially true doesn't necessarily mean we should believe it to be true. Um, so essentially, yeah, that's my argument. I would like to see some critiques of this argument. Honestly, if you have an issue with that, um, I would be happy to hear a critique of this argument. I think it's valid. Once again, it's not here to prove that an illusory world is impossible. I mean, there are examples of illusory worlds at the time. I mean, video games, VR, those are examples of an illusory world. But you know how we know it's not illusory is because we're outside of them, essentially. So, yeah, if you agree with that argument or if you disagree with it, let me know. And I'm going to start doing videos unscripted like this. It allows me to produce content quicker, more efficiently, and I'd rather upload like, once or twice a week rather than once every 2 weeks. So, thank you.